Ever since I was a very small child, I knew that my father wouldn't live to see me turn to a man. I grew up with a very sick father. My father, very large, 450 pounds at the time of his death. He suffered from congestive heart failure and polycystic kidney disease, a genetic disease that causes your kidneys to grow to be very large and covered in horrible cysts. It caused him a great amount of pain. Ever since I was very small, he instilled in me this idea that when he passed, that me being the oldest male of the family, I would someday have to be the man of the family. And I took that very much to heart. So in 1997, my father found out about a surgery that had just been developed in Brazil that might be able to help him with his congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure takes on a couple different forms, but in this particular case, what had happened was my father's heart had started to enlarge and got loose. His ventricles were becoming loose and it didn't pump properly. The surgery that they decided they were going to do was essentially cutting a large wedge out of the heart and sewing it back together, like making it smaller. The problem with this, of course, if anybody knows anything about basic cardiac ways of making things work, I suppose, the cells of the cardiac muscles have to be aligned on a microscopic level in order for those electrons to work properly. So after this surgery, his heart wasn't working properly. In addition, he was also on dialysis. So when he came out of the surgery room, he couldn't process the anesthesia out of his body because his kidneys weren't working properly. And they were afraid to give him dialysis because they were afraid it was going to stop his heart. We were at my Uncle Greg and Aunt Brenda's house that day. It was May 22nd, 1997. We had been staying with them because he was having surgery there in St. Bernardine's Hospital in San Bernardino. And they lived just a few blocks from there. My father's brother, my Uncle Greg's house. And we heard the surgery was a success. He lived through it. We were all very happy. We were hoping that after his surgery, he was going to be able to have more physical activities with us and maybe lose some weight and, get out and sort of do the things he always wanted to do, go fishing, go camping, the things that I didn't get to do as a kid because of his health problems. So we get a phone call that night saying that there was a problem and they wanted us to come in. My mother and I decided to go to the hospital together, leaving my brother, who was only 12 at the time, with my Uncle Greg, my Aunt Brenda, my cousin Mark, who were there at the house. We went up to the 6th floor of that hospital and stepped off the elevator, immediately saw my father's surgeon, and he simply told us exactly what I've already told you. He can't process the anesthesia out. We can't give him dialysis. He's not going to make it. We've done everything but open him back up. It's simply not going to happen. And my mother completely lost it. Started crying immediately. Now, I was 15 years old, and I didn't cry. Because I knew at that moment, if I started crying, I wasn't going to be the man of the family. I wasn't going to be able to take care of anybody. So I held my mother as she cried. And we got downstairs, back to the car, and we drove back to my Uncle Greg and Aunt Brenda's house. I didn't know how to drive, but I took that wheel and I drove back because my mother couldn't drive. She was that distraught. I had to be the man of the family. So we get to the house, and I walk up to the house, and there's my brother coming out on the porch, 12 years old, Tim. And I have to tell my younger brother, it's up to me. Dad's going to die. Dad's not going to make it. I had to go inside and tell my dad's brother, my Uncle Greg, who I've known since, birth, he's not going to make it. My Aunt Brenda, my cousin Mark. I'm the one that had to call my sister up and let her know that Dad's not going to make it. We drove back to the hospital, the whole bunch of us. My sister was still living in Hemet with her husband, of course, didn't come, but the rest of us all made it down there. And we stood around his bed. They let us in the room. And I'll never forget how he looked. He laid there, eyes half masked. His legs had gone jaundiced from being unable to process out the toxins in his body. It was a large scar across his chest. One little bead of blood that had poked out. And as his heart beat, you'd see the little blood ripple. And I knew that was his life. And so long as that was going, he was still there. Even though he may not be able to hear us, he was still there. And we all told him, we love you. We understand this is your time to go. Go on to heaven, Dad. We love you. We'll be good. We'll be okay. We'll make it without you. We don't want to make it without you, but we can. We're strong. You did that for us. Thank you. Went back to the house that night, and everybody cried. But I didn't, because I couldn't do it. I had to be the man of the family. It was about 1:30 in the morning when they called us up and told us my father had passed away. And everybody cried. And I didn't. So when everybody had finally cried themselves to sleep, I made sure everybody was okay. And I walked in the bathroom. For the very first time in my entire life, I cut my hair. 15 years of hair growth down to here. And I shaved my head bald, which was a sign of mourning amongst my people. I'm Native American, as some of you may already know. And I looked at myself in the mirror for the very first time really hard and realized how very much I looked like my father. And that's when I cried. I cried until I had no tears left.